Conversation and bring in Jeremy Vearey. He is a retired Major General of the SAPS in the Western Cape. Jeremy, it's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us. I'm just looking at your career to date. You were part of the anti-gang unit, the head of the anti-gang unit. You were also the cluster commander for Mitchell's Plain, and as I say, Major General of the SAPS in the Western Cape. Are these the same kinds of conversations we were having even when you were in those positions?
Yes, the same kind of conversations and the same kinds of tropes and the same kinds of misconceptions about what gangsterism is and how to combat it. And the big misconception that more boots on the ground actually prevents it. Yeah, it's just a repetition of what a lot of us have heard before. The same political responses with the same tropes. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, you've spoken to other media organizations about the kind of money being spent on the anti-gang unit, and yet we still see violence not only raging on, but increasing exponentially year after year. How do we balance those two issues?
Okay, let's take it up first. I want to mention by explaining what gangsterism is and how to misunderstand that. Now, if you use the Muizenberg example, we basically have a corporate battle inside the junkie funkies for control over the turf they already had. So there's no turf contestation. And the use of violence is how one faction dominates that turf to show their strength. Now, why are they doing this? And why does it just recur and every time happens? I think one of the things we need to understand, gangs like the junkie funkies and the hard livings and all of these guys, they have been around for 60, 70 years. Okay? And they have grown into organized crime syndicates that exercises private control, social control over shared public spaces, schools, parks, public names, for profit-making and criminal accumulation purposes. So it's a market that they're fighting over. And the internal contestation in some of them, like in Mitchell's Plain amongst the 28s or amongst the JFKs, is a natural product of internal corporate battles over the wealth that is generated by that business market. So it is not going to stop by the mere presence of visible police. If we are thinking that way, for the past 100 years that we've been around, no form of visible policing has deterred gang violence or organized crime. We simply do not have the forces to deal with the scale of the problem when violence breaks out. So that's the first thing. So to me, one of the crucial pillars in policing, if one was to follow that approach, I will come to the community approach, is to strengthen the only capability that delivers and puts gangsters in jail, and that is detectives, investigations. So what we must ask ourselves when the next budget thing, or look at the budget for policing across the different programs for policing, one must look at where does most of the money go? Does it go into building and strengthening the detective capability, who are the only people who put people in jail in the mandate of the police, and through the courts and through proper investigation? And if they are understaffed and undercapacitated, then one understands the whole policing cycle fails. Forget about intelligence. There's also this trope that intelligence, and as in strengthening crime intelligence, is going to deliver this. Let me tell you, it's a false trope throughout history. Because the people who handle most informers in the police are detectives. So what we perhaps need to look at is the sharpening of that type of capability, because no single crime intelligence capability will be able to deal with this scope of informer coverage that is required to deal with gangs across the Western Cape or in other parts. Only detectives who have that close organic relationship to the ground, who daily engage that environment, that violence, and develop informers, they are the primary deliverable. If one is looking at intelligence, one is looking more at the more strategic and macro operational things, but not in terms of what is tactically required to put people in jail who are gangsters under the new act. So that's the first thing I would see strengthening. But coming to the community, I said we're dealing with gangs, and they are really an alternative form of governance in our area. The turf is their market. They exercise social control by means of violence and power. And no policing will be able to counter that. Okay? Alternative power. The thing that challenges it, to me, what I saw in Mitchell's Plain, is forms of mobilization together with policing, if one should put it that seeks to take back the streets, street by street and block by block from them. And that requires a strong sense of community solidarity and building organizations that can form a united front, whether they against gangs.
You're talking about street committees, Jeremy?
Not only street committees, all of them. All of us who are broken into fragmented type of responses to crime should forget about trying to rely on the state to address this problem. That we must demand how they must address it later. But what we should do is start building our own people's power on the ground to wrestle territorial control through mobilization, together with the support of the police in an area like we did in the past, in some areas. And there was that retreat. But the moment that unity doesn't exist, that solidarity doesn't exist, that can intervene, that can support visible policing, for that matter, visible policing becomes a misnomer.
So the issues being brought up by the KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, and you will know that there's an ad hoc committee now looking into those serious allegations. Part of what he has alleged is that the very top brass of the police are involved in criminal enterprises. So as part of what you've described, would that also be part of why we can't seem to get this gangsterism issue under control?
Yes, that would be part of the issue, but not the only issue. Community consent and complacency is another fundamental issue that deals with this, and even engenders corruption in some cases, in my experience. But talking about what General Mkhwanazi said, it is indeed true that we've reached a stage where there is almost a deep state criminal forms of corruption that operate in the service. In the Cape, we have the example of Judge Tulari's judgment, where he directly referred, and the rest we've said that the 28s have infiltrated the highest levels of policing in the Western Cape. I know that to be true. We have found in the past crime intelligence reports at Mr. Big in Belaar, for example, in the 90s, direct crime intelligence documents. We have found in the case of when we were investigating Stachy, a crime intelligence document at a lawyer representing 26 and 28 gang leaders, detailing the name of an informer of crime intelligence who was consequently killed.
Sure.
So these things are not abnormal, they are part of the cause in the battle of gangs. I mean, you're dealing with people who want to control a market, and we're dealing with detectives who want to use the prevention of organized crime to destroy that market. So investing in corrupting police officers is part of normal business. It's not foreign to this particular terrain in the Western Cape or organized crime elsewhere. So what General Makonazi said is true. And that poses another challenge, you know. Does the Hawks or any other capacity tied to policing, are they really the place where these things must be investigated? This type of corruption? My answer is no. It should be driven from a prosecutorial level or the NPA level, similar to what structures like the Assets Forfeiture Unit has, which is semi-independent from the police, or structures like IDAC, one involved in some of the allegations General Makonazi refers to. But the principle of having that kind of prosecution, that kind of authority, and bringing it to bear in dealing with corruption is proving to yield more results, I believe, slowly, but it needs to be better capacitated, and constantly need to battle the threat of compromise in the police, in crime intelligence, or whatever dimension there. Let's take it outside of our control. If what Judge Tulare is saying in the Western Cape is true, if it's proven to be true, then it's the logical thing to do.
I mean, that's a shocking revelation. The fact that, you know, gang members had sight of intelligence reports and it resulted in the death of an informant. The other issue, of course, is that we are short of thousands of detectives, which is another key issue that you've talked about in trying to fight gangsterism and crime in the Western Cape. Jeremy Vearey, let me thank you for your time. I think you could have this conversation for a lot longer, but thanks indeed for your insights into what is a perennial issue. Retired Major General of the SAPS in the Western Cape, was also the head of the anti-gang unit and the Mitchells Plain Cluster Commander.